And this it's got documents, like, a lot of construction process is very carefully with super shallow email. So, you know, it's all.
Yeah, yeah.
That training is good, but it's just geared towards.
Sure. Yeah, and I do know that that did come up in his conversation with
Right.
some of the items that
Right.
a lot of kind of feeling about that. Depending on both sides, right? We anticipate that most recreational boats are under 2 foot draft. So we do feel that it is we aren't making it any shallower in any of these areas. So we anticipate that these docks just come upstream and then ride this out.
And, I mean, it's not the same.
The channel that. And then you see here, and then beneath the shoreline there's metal sheet pipes that go vertical.
It was all the questions I was expecting. He said it was right. Who I was expecting.
Wow, you can leave your name and information and your walk-in and follow up with you.
Oh, good evening. Hi, how are you?
Yeah, if you want to leave it.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our public outreach meeting here. So I'm Sam Matthews, the Chief of Locks and Dams, and tonight we're here to present to you, and we've got a variety of topics of people throughout the room on different things: water management, forestry project management, talk a little PMP. I know about the locks and dams and the operation. We're going to try and be brief on our slides. We're actually here for you and what you want to know. So if you have questions, ask well. And we're focused primarily on goals 2 and 3. So Bree's going to follow me.
Thanks, Sam. This is an example of the work that the Corps does across the enterprise from recreation, stewardship, navigation, flood risk management. The Corps touches on anything water resources related, and also emergency response. We have crews that have gone to wildfire recovery and to the Carolinas for Hurricane Helene. St. Paul District covers a large area of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa and North Dakota. Our focus is our navigation, flood risk management, ecosystem restoration, environmental stewardship, recreation, and emergency management. Staff here tonight will share information on projects in goals 2 and 3, and these often pertain to one or more of these mission areas. I'm going to cover some information on navigation. A major focus is navigation on the upper Mississippi River. We maintain a 9-foot navigation channel from Minneapolis to Guttenberg, Iowa. This involves operating and maintaining 13 locks and dams, dredging the channel, and managing river flows. This allows large traffic to move essential commodities like grain, coal, fertilizer, supporting both regional and national economies. In 2023, there were $3 billion in commodities alone that moved through St. Paul District, and the river is an overall larger system. And you can see on the map where commodities have flowed through. The Corps routinely surveys the navigation channel to determine if shoals have accumulated, causing restrictions. Removal of this material is done through dredging, and that's either through hydraulic or mechanical means. Hydraulic dredge pumps sand and water to a designated placement site, where mechanical uses like an excavator to remove the material, and that is loaded onto a barge and then placed at a placement site. To manage dredge material, we complete these dredge material management plans. The Pool 2 here locally is completed, and we're working on implementing the plan. We know the material that we need to dredge for the next 20 to 40 years, and we've identified placement capacity needs, and we're working to implement the solution from the recommended plan for that solution. We're also continuing to collaborate with federal and state agencies to look for beneficial use opportunities. Beneficial use could be anything from ecosystem restoration to construction materials or land fill cover or strip mine reclamation. I must have taken the slide out, but we're working on kicking off the Pool 3 and Pool 4 TMMP, and that would address capacity needs from Hastings to the head of Lake Pepin. And the internal team members have been identified for that group, and they're working on the TMMP study outline and anticipating some public scoping meetings in the area this summer to fall. The next step will be Sam.
All right, thank you. All right, this slide is just some real brief statistics on the navigation in this section of the river. So that's Lock 10, which is Guttenberg, Iowa, all the way up to Minneapolis. Probably the key takeaways from here, I mean, it's the economic impact of the area. 78.6 million tons. Yes, it's below the 10-year average. However, it's still a lot of commodity, the value of it. And I know it's a little difficult to see here. The other part of it is the recreational use of the river. Over 12,000 lockages, over 24,000 individual vessels that we were able to capture in a lock performance monitoring system. That's a lot of people, it's a lot of commodity moving, and that's the key takeaway. The interesting part is that you can see here, we only had an extra week, and that's an average year, 260 days. Just a neat picture from Lock 3, and they're packed in there really deep. And that kind of leads into my next one about, those of you that have walked through, please be safe when you do it. Locks can be a dangerous area, they're busy, there's currents, there's other people moving through there. The big thing, we like to be contacted over channel 14, we like lock operators that work in my section, they have radios, they'll contact you back, otherwise there's a full code on each end using the PA system. Please be patient as we assist everybody out there, be safe, go slow. They're going to use a variety of things to communicate with you, whether it's talking to you just like I am, they're going to use the traffic lights, air horns. You always have fun. Have all your safety gear out there. Maybe use it though, just because of the air currents and submerged debris that may pop up unexpectedly. And real quick, some work in the last year. So we did do the repair to the upper guide wall at Lock 2. That was a toe damage that was repaired this summer. A pretty good sized project. It's the top picture there. It's the best one I got. They repaired that in that Lock 3. You can see this is the end result. They're putting in some bulkhead slots on the auxiliary chamber. So that's that half chamber if you're down there. No traffic can pass through it. And the reason is those gates are original from when these were built in the 30s. We're going to pull those gates out and replace them with set of refurbished ones. So we'll go another 50 to 90 years before we do another refurbishment. And that's the major work that I am projecting up here. And I will be followed by Nick Castle.
Hello folks, thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Max Lane, I'm a project manager here with St. Paul District Army Corps of Engineers. So what I wanted to focus on today was a couple of projects that we have going on in Pool 2 and Pool 3. The Lock Dam upper guide wall repair, which Sam mentioned briefly, the Lock Dam 2 protective island, and the core island unloading down in Pool 3. Lock Dam 2 upper guide wall. The contract was awarded in 2024 after a margin impact caused the upper guide wall to tilt back in October of 2023. The Army Corps of Engineers, we got together, we put together a temporary fix on the guide wall for the remainder of the navigation to prevent that guide wall from falling into the ice loading during the winter months. During the spring, the contractor, Mr. Marine, went out there, excavated the guide wall, rebuilt it, put everything back together just in time for navigation season to open, March 14th. And the estimated completion date is the construction that actually been completed. We are right now in the closeout portion, which is where we get our as-builts, our surveys, and submittals from the contractor. And to utilize this, right, this is navigation's first step project, so if there wasn't any availability on this to be cover boats, which again, expends time and this next project has been a project going on for a number of years now. This is the Lock Dam 2 protective island goal for this feature to protect the embankment that goes from the main shoreline at the lock. That is the backup. The area. Well, there's kind of twofold authority. We went ahead and in order to maintain the navigation channel, the zero in order, and in order to do that, we place it. So embankment was investigated and determined by engineers to need some work. A number of teams got together and came forward with this Lock Dam protective island. What this island plans to do is reduce the mile and wave action that puts the eruptive forces on the embankment. You see the way it is and in an effort to sediment and size keeps us effective. So floor elevation is not affected on this island. In addition to preserving that embankment and keeping safe material, the team took quite a lot of time and energy to incorporate some items such as a marshland for amphibians, migrating bird species. It'll have various heights along both lengths. Some of those will contain little tree plants would be native. This purple and blue is just south of the drum, featuring fish habitat, fine material for that wetland area. This we anticipate to promote those habitats, crop, catfish, and some other species. We utilize rock veins and grab along the edges, one to both facilities, and also there's really fast implication for just the listed landing sterling. This project is again under the navigation. We do anticipate that completion would be in 2027 with the plantings. And construction is slated to begin June 2nd mobilization.
Could we go back to that slide previously, please?
Sir.
You tell. I see there's two parts of drawing there, where the trees are, where the sand is, where the riprap is. Sure, and my home is also in that picture. It's a beautiful view back here. And it's not view I thought wasn't sand, riprap, and tree grass.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, I understand that concern. And, ultimately, as the project went forward, we were looking at multiple options, whether or not we should fill in sand embankment all the way across, whether to keep it as an island, whether to make it bigger, and shape, things like that. I don't know personally what your view looks like there. The island is on a feet above elevation. You'll see that this side is going to be a little bit higher by this center line here. That'll be a lot of those planted native grasses throughout the rest of it. Sand and then where the joints around and the more riprap, sure that the sediment doesn't flow down. This will be all armored up here as well, and then that'll block wind and wave action. Causing a problem down here like that. We have measured recently, and this is over 700 feet away from the shoreline. That indication of 700 feet wide on the top of the island here.
That was, when you were telling me earlier that it was 700 feet, I was questioning that. I just stepped it off down the river from shore to kind of where those, we look at, we can back at the first clump of trees there. I'm 350. My dock is the right one you see there is 50 feet long. It doesn't seem like it's more than 10 times that, yeah, seems closer to me. Yeah, you must know.
Yeah, I apologize. As far as that goes, I had my twice today. Okay. I don't get correct information.
Okay.
Some of it, again, that's the average, 730 feet. More.
This looks like it's A to me, for lack of a better term. The capital A. The middle top part of the A, is that island or is that water at this point?
This portion right here, this portion is going to utilize fine material to create approximately 1 foot of wall. That helps fill it with grasses and sediment, or grasses and other vegetation as allowed and rotation.
for that to say. Like some kind
Like
of.
right there, yeah. This is, if I'm not
That's a little bit of
water.
But
Speak about the algebra, I interpret most of that to be
often red.
Awesome. I can't guarantee what it will look like. We anticipate long replat grasses. Maybe reptiles, things like that.
Will the channel start to silt in along those docks?
I don't anticipate it to along those docks based on the shape of the island. The wind comes from this direction, from straight up north, and come into here. I can't guarantee if these rivers go where they want. You can, what really was to try to minimize any of that action by the ship.
Modeling of water flow patterns and how.
Yes, there has. Yep.
Is there flow or no flow?
There is flow.
So it's gonna flow from the upper top, it's gonna flow through and then it's gonna wrap back around.
Well,
Channel.
flow of water will depend obviously on the wind, even things like that. So after water comes, there has this way, it should this way.
Okay. That's gonna. That's the flow model.
Potentially.
Currently, it's the opposite. Currently, it comes down there, and then there, and then loops around, and then it goes up in channel like drops. That's where it goes.
Those forces together, we're not gonna see any collection of stuff fills in.
I can't guarantee that, but as our modeling and it shouldn't.
Is there any places where this shape of island has been built elsewhere on the? Is there any passage of time to understand?
Not to my knowledge. I don't guarantee you know, 150 years worth of island building, I'm not certain.
But this shape happened anywhere else on the Mississippi River ship?
That's not what I'm saying, I'm not sure. Sir,
So one of the problems, and I know that channels are that I've been thinking about for years. Years ago, there was an island called the Long Wall Buck Island, and most of the area and shut the channel out to the east. What impact is this going to have on that movement of sediment that's making a difference into that line? So,
well, the placement of this island, I remember that we looked at it a number of years ago, but I don't believe there's any board of sand over in the channel. I know that we have been asked by it. What's that?
what did it done?
Well, the island was there, so I don't know what did it previously.
Just want to stop it, make it worse?
When we modeled it, it didn't make it worse. Again, a river's I mean, it's not a living thing, but it's going to do what it does. A lot of things come into effect. It's not just a lot of the hypotheticals I can't answer. I do know that we designed a lot of islands on UMR project. Big's Eye Islands were just built last year and the year before. I mean, we try to do our best not to have any negative impacts.
I guess the question I would have had is why not move it up further upriver so it would stop some of it?
We can't move it further upriver because then it leaves the ineffective flow zone, and then it can change the elevations of the pool or river activity. So in order to keep the pool elevation to where it historically is, we had to stay within a certain area for this.
The shadow. Yeah. Okay.
I can talk more specific afterwards. Alright. And then the core island, which is planned for contract award in 2025, we anticipate $5 to $10 million, depending on the contractor, and the bidding that happens. This again is under navigation authority. The goal for this is to remove sediment from core island, approximately 400 cubic thousand yards, move it down to locking in 3 on a barge, transfer it onto trucks, and then haul those away in the vicinity of the Prairie Island, upstream of Red Wing, Minnesota. We do anticipate having in the contract that when there are concert times and events at Treasure Island, that the contractor will stop the activity for safety purposes and traffic purposes.
That's the island up, just upriver from Red Wing, but from Locking Dam Fort, or like, yeah.
Yes, sir. All right, Andy.
All right, thank you. My name is Andy Meyer. I'm a forester with the St. Paul District based out of our La Crosse, Wisconsin field office. And I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the Recreation and Natural Resources branch work on the river. And this will be kind of a little bit more focused on generally on what we do, less than specific projects up here, because we don't do, the large scale multi-million-dollar projects. We're much more land managers of the land that the Corps owns. So across the nation, the Corps owns millions of acres of land and water areas, and so as part of the management of those lands and waters, we're required to maintain those lands in a way that maintains both the habitats for wildlife as well as recreational and public use of the land. So we have kind of two main missions in the recreation and natural resources program. One is our recreation mission, and that covers most states in the United States. This is our strategic plan from 2021, so some of the information is a little bit outdated, but across the nation we have over 250 million visits to our recreational sites. But then we also have an environmental stewardship program, and that covers 12 million acres of public lands and waters across the United States, and we do a lot of management on those things. So I'm going to kind of specifically cover some of the main things that we do within St. Paul District. A few years back, we developed or updated our master plan for recreation and natural resource management. We had a series of public meetings at that point in time and had some discussion on this master plan. And this is kind of a guiding document that informs the work that we do as natural resource management on the river of the lands that the Corps owns. Again, focused on recreation and environmental stewardship. That's separate from the navigation mission that Sam and Bree and Nick have kind of touched on. And so in this master plan, we don't get into dredging and water level management. It's purely land management and recreation. A big part of this plan is the development of what we call a land allocation land classification plan, in which we kind of took all the land that's owned by the Corps and we designated it for different primary uses. And farther south of Lake Pepin, so outside of this range, a big chunk of the land that we own is actually co-managed with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as part of the Upper Mississippi River National Wildlife and Fish Refuge. So that land classification process was a joint process with them. All this master plan stuff is available on our website. I think the easiest thing to do is to just Google St. Paul District Mississippi River Master Plan or something like that, and you'll get to the web page. We have maps like this that are available on the web page where you can actually see the land ownership. And so this is, I don't know if a lot of you know, Lake Rebecca Park, or a good portion of Lake Rebecca Park is actually Corps-owned land that's leased to the city of Hastings as a recreational health grant. So we work with the city of Hastings specifically in Lake Rebecca Park on some of the management work that's being done there. On these maps, pretty much anything that's brown is Corps of Engineers owned land that's designated for wildlife management. The red areas are areas that are designated for project operations, and that's primarily going to be locks and dams and lock and dam infrastructure. And then we have other areas that are either yellow, which is our areas. This is the boat landing at Lake Rebecca Park that's classified as high density recreation. And then some of the beaches along the river where it's more passive recreation or not developed recreation, but people use those areas, we have classified as primarily being used for low density recreation. And then on these maps, we also have state lands identified. So all the purple on this map is Minnesota DNR land as part of the Gores Wildlife Management Area. So our recreation program, we have a couple of campgrounds and boat landings. These are all part of the south that are core owned and managed. Black Hawk Park in Pool 9 is the primary core managed campground on the river, and then we have a couple of core managed boat landings farther south. We also have recreation grants. I mentioned Lake Rebecca and Hastings. In pools 8 and pool 10, we also have a couple more recreation grants. Basically, federal land that's been leased to either local municipalities or to some private concessionaires to allow for recreation. Environmental stewardship is the other big piece, and the real responsibility within the environmental stewardship mission is to manage and conserve the natural resources on the lands that are owned as part of Corps of Engineers projects. And the focus is really conservation, preservation, and protection of USA's Corps of Engineers land and water resources. In St. Paul District, that primarily focuses on two programs: our shoreline and boundary management program, and then a wildlife habitat management program. Shoreline management, in pools 2 and 3, when the Corps acquired the land for the 9-foot navigation channel project in the 1930s, we also acquired a strip of land in a lot of places that's immediately adjacent to the river. And so in those places, we may have 10 or 20 feet of shoreline between water and private land. And so, when this program was established, we allowed private landowners who had adjacent land to establish docks or other ways to access the water on public land. The main areas in Pool 3, we have a few shoreline permits within Sturgeon Lake, just south of the Prairie Island Indian community, and along near the Treasure Island. But the majority of these are also going to be farther south on the river. We additionally have, or basically that program allows for some permitted docks, boathouse and support structures. We have a policy and procedure for what is and isn't allowed, and so we have Shoreline Ranger Ashley Kiley, whose contact information is there at the bottom of the slide, who manages these programs. If anyone has any questions about it, I can certainly touch on it a little bit after the presentation. But the best thing is to get in contact with Ashley, and she can explain the program more thoroughly. A lot of this requires coordination with our regulatory program to make sure that we're not violating any of the regulations associated with wetlands and navigable waters of the United States. And so part of that process is coordinating that. And then there's a fee associated with having those docks and other things on core land. It's relatively small for what we have. The other thing is our office is responsible for managing the boundary lines, and so we've got about 200 plus miles of boundary within from the Twin Cities all the way south to Gothenburg, Iowa. And so if you're out along one of our boundaries, you should see a sign that has a little Corps of Engineers boundary survey marker on top of it. We try to survey these on a relatively regular basis, but again, it takes a long time to cover 200 miles, and some areas are higher priority than others. But we try to keep up with that as much as we can. And then the final big thing that we do, which I'm more involved with, is wildlife habitat management. Within St. Paul District, we have about 23,000 acres of Corps of Engineers owned land that's classified for wildlife management. As I said before, the majority of that south of Pool 4 in Lake Pepin is incorporated up in the Upper Mississippi River National Wildlife and Fish Refuge. We actually have about 2,000 acres on the southern end of the Gores Wildlife Management Area in pool 3, that's leased to Minnesota DNR, that we co-manage with them, and then the remainder of it is primarily Corps of Engineers, sole Corps of Engineers management. Because the river is a complicated jurisdictionally, our management is primarily focused on the land that the Corps owns. We help out a little bit with aquatic management, but a lot of that is done through interagency partnerships to determine how the aquatic resources are managed. So our management is primarily floodplain forest management, which is a lot of tree planting and invasive species control, which you can kind of see in the first two pictures here. And then we do a lot of, or we're starting to do a lot more prairie management, prescribed fire, and that kind of thing to promote pollinator habitat and grassland habitat in areas that we manage. So again, that's my last slide, but I'll be around to take any questions as people might have. And Dan is up next with water level management.
Hey there. Thanks.
All right, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. My name is Dan Foshang. I'm in the water management section. I sit in the St. Paul District headquarters. Essentially, my job every day is to get up extra early to monitor the weather, count the rain, monitor the upstream tributaries, and to direct the gate openings at our 13 locks and dams on the Mississippi River. So it's about 250 navigable river miles. And I'm here to cover about 3 kind of more general concepts about locks and dams. And hopefully you guys will learn something new about their capabilities and their purpose. So the first concept I want to talk about is there are different kinds of dams. The reason I'm bringing this up is we get a question a lot of, oh, the water's real low in, I don't know, pool 2 or something. Why don't you open up lock 1 and help us out? Well, it's not quite that simple. So the locks and dams, or any dam, you could think of as like a bucket, storage of water, right? So we have 2 buckets here, just to kind of explain the difference between a dam, lock and dam, and a reservoir. So let's play a little thought experiment here. If we were to fill up both of these buckets to the brim, and we were to just let them drain, can you guess which one would drain first? That'd be the white bucket, right? Now, if we were to, let's say, start filling the buckets, or starting from an empty bucket, we're starting to fill it up with maybe a really big hose, maybe several hoses, put the same amount, which bucket would fill first in that occasion? That would be, you want to guess? The blue one, yeah, pretty simple. Now, it's the same concept with locks and dams and a reservoir. So the real difference I'm trying to point out here is that it's about the ratio of water coming in and out of the bucket pool and the size of the bucket pool itself. So lock and dam 2, for instance, has about 106,000 cubic acre feet of water, so that's volume. And if we were to, let's say, open it up, let's say there's no inflow, we're opening it up to an average outflow, it would take 8 days to drain the whole pool. If we were to do the same thought experiment for Sandy Lake up in northern Minnesota, about 60K acre feet, and an average flow, small hole, right? Bucket, big hole, small hole. Take 100 days for Sandy Lake to drain. Now, reservoirs are much different because we would never place them in the middle of a river. That's the real difference I'm getting at. Another way to think about this is a lock and dam is like that bucket, and even more so than maybe just having a big hole in it, we could actually remove the bottom. Let's say we're filling it so fast, it's like a fire hose, right? And in those cases, we need to remove the bottom of the bucket and let all the water go. We know that during floods, the lock and dams don't have a big effect because the water level downstream of the dam equalizes with the water level upstream of the dam. So that happens, of course, during spring melt or every time it rains a lot. We literally pull the gates above the water. And those who live close to it, I see you nod your head, you would see this, obviously. But there's more to this. So I'm going to back up a little bit. Let's say we're in a drought scenario. So this is the, if you guys have been around or maybe do other of these Army Corps forums, you might have seen this image before. This is the classic stairwell of water image. So this is the Mississippi River. This is Minneapolis here, well, more like here. And you can imagine if we took the river and we bisected it right down the center and then laid it flat on a sheet of paper like a fish, this is what it would look like, almost to scale. These are the elevation drops. You can see up St. Anthony Falls, that's a nice 50-foot drop there. You've got about a 25-foot drop at lower, about 30-foot drop at block 1, and about 12-foot drop block 2, 8-foot drop block 3, so on and so forth, all the way down. This goes to St. Louis. After that, it turns into a natural flow. You get the idea. And this is actually a really great image, though, of what the river looks like in a drought scenario. So the river level at the dam at Lock 2 actually equalizes with the downstream elevation at Lock 1. So it literally flattens out, literally turns into a giant stairwell of water, just over 30 miles, instead of a stairwell that we're used to. So let's say we get some rain. We get enough rain that, like we were talking about before, we have to pull off the bottom of the bucket. We open the gates up wide. Well, in those situations, the water level, like we said, equalizes with the upstream level of the dam, and that natural slope of the river is actually restored. And in those occasions, the river would be the same level with or without the dams in place. Way back when, and maybe 1870s, they called it the steamboat era, they would actually have to wait until spring or until a big rain event to actually navigate up this far of the river. But you can see that kind of natural state of the river is restored, where it follows more like what you're used to, right? It follows the topography of the land itself. That relationship of more water means higher elevation is restored. So that's another way to think about it. The locks and dams are really about drought control, not flood control. Let's say we get even more water on top of that. We get some more rain, something like that. The water level will rise even more. And yeah, so it depends where you are in the pool, though. So let's zoom in on that, actually. So we zoom in on, well, pool 4 here, but it's the same concept, whatever pool you're in. Basically, the closer you are to the downstream controlling dam, the less fluctuation you're going to notice in the water level at your dock. It's important to think about because if you're setting, your dock poles and stuff, you want to be cognizant of which river mile you're in and how close you are to the controlling dam. Now, this is a consequence of the topography of the land itself and the amount of water in the basement, in the basin itself. Those are two factors that the Army Corps just can't control. It's just the consequence of the land and how much water is in the system. And we simply are reacting between the state of flat pool up to the state of pulling gates and beyond with flooding and mitigation. So here's some breakdowns. You guys are focused on first two pools. These kind of distinctions, high, medium, low flow distinctions, they're really about a state of operation at the dam. This is different than the Weather Service stuff. This is very different than the ordinary high water mark. Very different. This is about basically how many gates are in the dam is what this is correlating. You can see when the flow at block 2 is about 13,000 or less, that's when we're in that flat pool scenario. And so if you go up to the upper parts of pool 2, you'll notice that. And it'll be more important to stay within the map channel to get around. The medium flow is here, 13 to 61,000. 61,000 is when we actually pull the gates at Lock Dam 2. So at the end of this, and if you know how to monitor the water flows on the Weather Service, you can remember this number and know that if it's reading 61,000, we are going to pull gates or have already pulled gates. Right? It's going to happen. When that between this kind of flat pool scenario and the pulling gates, that tailwater at Lock 2 fluctuates 12 feet. and then 8 feet at lock 3. During 2023, the last kind of big flood that we had, if you're on the upper end of the pool, or where you guys are talking about, right in front of the dam at lock 2, you would have noticed an extra elevation of about 2.5 feet. It came up from its normal flat pool level.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah, at least. And
Closer to 5, I think.
okay, well, if you're at the other end of the dam, you would have noticed at least a 14.5 foot elevation change. So that's why it's important. That's the big message for you guys. And tell your friends.
Where are we at right now? Kind of at the 13,000?
We're about 20,000 CFS, so we're in
Yes.
this medium range at lock 2 today. Yep. So yeah, that's my big message for you guys today. So pretty simple. I did bring my hydraulic model with those 3 scenarios pre-ran on it, so I can use it without the internet here. If you want to poke around with me and look at specific river miles, you guys are pretty easy being right at the dam, you know what's going on. But if you're in between gauges, sometimes it can be tricky because you'll see somewhere in between that 13 to 2.5 foot fluctuation. So I pre-ran those models, and you can take a look at where your specific location is you want to know about and what kind of fluctuation you might see. And then finally, here are some of those links I was talking about. This is our water management page. It's a little more up to date, a little simpler than the weather service one. If you want to see the flows at the dam or the live pool fluctuations, you can check that out. We have our multi-district site if you want to go even farther downriver. This is actually nationwide. And then, of course, the NCRC river forecast that you should all know and love. So I'll leave it there.
All right, thank you, Dan. Thank you to all our presenters. Folks, I appreciate you all coming out tonight. This is the end of the presentation, but we're all going to be here for a little while, pick our brains, ask questions. If we can't get you the answer, try and take down as much information and reach out to somebody and get back to you with the best that we can. Like Dan said, he's over there. We got a series of charts. If you don't know your exact river mile, you got a piece of property that you have questions about, you know, approximately where it is, you can dig through it and work with them and ask the rest of us. We do appreciate you coming out tonight, taking your time to ask us questions and interested in what you have to say about pools 2 and 3 or other places in the St. Paul district. Thank you all.
Thank you.